much right as you and I to be here on the face of this earth. And that a democracy encourages that. A democracy allows that. A democracy doesn't allow for one particular point of view to be risen above another. It says that no, simultaneously all of us can coexist. And in a constitutional democracy, it is not the place of government to determine your life project. It is not the place of government to say that this particular life project is okay and this particular life project is not. The only standard that is used is, we ask the question, is what you are doing, does that negatively affect the rights of other citizens to do what it is that they want to do? And the reality of the matter is, if you allow people to smoke cigarettes in your country, if you allow people to drink alcohol, if you allow prescription medicine to be issued within your country, there is absolutely no basis on which you can argue that people should not have the right to use cannabis if that is what they choose. When you say that every individual have the right to autonomy, that means that you have the right to decide what goes into your body. The state cannot prescribe to you what it is that you should be putting into your body. And for all intents and purposes, the argument around cannabis also holds true for any other substances within society. Governments want us to believe that methamphetamines, what people generally call tip or mandrax or cocaine and all of these things, that they are responsible for so many deaths. But the truth of the matter is that that is not true. Alcohol and tobacco kills 10 million people worldwide. That you can find on the Center for Disease Control of the United States. Just occurs to you on their website. 10 million people a year dies as a result of alcohol and tobacco, but there's not a government in the world that will consider to criminalize these substances. Because they know they will be committing political suicide if that is what they intend to do. Because you cannot arrest this problem. You find that human beings will always be able to outwit and outsmart laws that was framed to regulate things which cannot, in essence, be framed. So the government still are, in South Africa, very reluctant to come to the party, and we were forced to take them to court and to engage with them in an adversarial manner, telling the judge that what the government of South Africa is doing is not proper, it's not democratic, it is not constitutional. And our argument initially was equality. That is the main right that was violated with the cannabis prohibition. However, the courts latched onto the right to privacy. Because privacy made it much more palatable, I would reckon, for the judges in order to live with this type of decision. So the Constitutional Court found in our favor, and it said that the criminal laws against cannabis violated the right to privacy. Now, the way that constitutional jurisprudence works, in a court case, you only have to succeed in proving that the laws violate one right guaranteed in your constitution. And that is what the South African Constitutional Court did in the case where myself and Jules and Myrtle as the Duffer couple also joined in. And that is what they found ultimately, which ordered the South African government to change the laws within the next 24 months and to bring about a regulatory framework that would allow for the growth of cannabis, for the cultivation of cannabis, for the possession and the transportation of cannabis as such. Now, in a country where you struggle with poverty, unemployment and disease, cannabis is like a boon from heaven. Because in a country such as South Africa, which has a strong agricultural basis, there is not a more environmental friendlier crop than cannabis. Bearing in mind that with modern day technologies and advancement, we have now discovered so many things that can be done with this plant. You're talking about food. The cannabis seed has the complete balance of omega-3, 6, and 9 fatty acids within them. The cannabis seed is the most nutritious seed on the face of the earth. We're talking about the ability to build bricks from hemp cream for houses. We're talking about fiber for clothing. We're talking about medicine from the buds. You're talking about thousands of products that can be manufactured in an environmentally friendly manner. Governments, if they claim to be at all concerned about their people and the ability of their people to live a dignified life, governments all over Africa should get behind this plant. And we should challenge these normative framework that currently exists, for instance, in relation to medicine. People want to speak about, oh yes, but no, we're afraid of the high that the THC brings. We should rather stick with CBD. All of these are artificial separations that people make, and they have very little basis in science. So now people are saying, oh yes, but we should focus on planting hemp, because that means that our kids are not going to get high, and God knows what they're going to do when they get high. We are saying no. This plant has specific, and it has many purposes. The buds you use for medicine, the fiber and the stalks you use for fiber, and all of the other things that you can get from the plant. Why should we limit ourselves? South Africa, when we did the first hemp project, they paid 3 million rand to import seeds from Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and some other country in Europe. Why should we import seeds when we grow land-raised strains within South Africa? Why couldn't we look to a country like Lesotho, for instance? Because in Lesotho you find the variety of cannabis that grows there is not as potent as the varieties that grow within South Africa, because of the fact that Lesotho is a mountain kingdom and is much higher placed than South Africa. Therefore the plant automatically produces more CBD as opposed to THC. But if the government really knew, and if they were really interested in what this plant can do for us, then that knowledge they would have discovered long time ago. But still, they're talking about importing seeds into South Africa, not knowing the effect that these could have on basic land-raised strains. People are talking about medicines, CBD medicine that can be made from hemp, as if the medicine that you can make from THC should be scorned. When we talk about cancer, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, these are the diseases that you conquer with THC. You know, people say, one of my favorite slogans is that you cannot spell healthcare without THC. And that is the big bucks all over the world. South African and Southern African cannabis contains THCV. Most cannabis in the world, they contain THC. But the ones that grow in South Africa, specifically, contains THCV. And they have discovered that when it comes to making medicine, that these are the most suitable strains for making medicine. You find that in Europe, people pay more for THCV cannabis than what they pay for hybrid cannabis. So we in South Africa, we've got a novel and we've got a niche product that we need to make use of. Our governments, if they're talking about getting foreign revenues, right here is our source. Reliable, renewable. That's what it is. And it is a crying shame that only pharmaceutical companies can make billions of dollars while other people still have to go to jail. If I can make one example, the world's biggest AIDS selling drug is called Marinol. Marinol is nothing but dronabinol. And dronabinol is nothing else but THC. Now in the South African legislation, if you look at the manner in which they define dagga, they say it's all parts of the plant except THC and dronabinol. So they're telling us that that is not dagga. But the reasons why they did that was simply so that they could export the medicine internationally, because in terms of the international laws currently in existence, you needed to have permission in order to transport that internationally. And that's the reason why that was exempted from the definition of dagga. So for the past 25 years, a few pharmaceutical companies have made billions selling dronabinol, which they say is synthetically synthesized, whatever that means. So they claim that they took the essence of the plant and they synthesized it in a laboratory. But that is a lie, because 2 years ago I drove into a roadblock with 5 syringes of cannabis oil and a couple of capsules of cannabis trichomes. So when they sent that to the lab, they said that this contained dronabinol. But I didn't produce it in a lab, I made it in my kitchen. But the lab told me that is dronabinol in there, my good sir. And because it's dronabinol, it is considered to be a dangerous dependent producing substance. Dagga was considered an undesirable dependent producing substance. And there's a funny story that's attached to that. The reason why it was considered undesirable, because it was considered to make young white girls sexually licentious, and that caused them to interact intimately with blacks and colors, and that was something that the apartheid government could not fathom. How could these Christian girls, Christian raised girls, suddenly be so swayed by this? This must be the devil's weed. And that is how cannabis came to be seen, because it broke down the barriers of apartheid and it caused more interaction on a social level between the different races in South Africa. Now that is what we all want. We want the interaction. None of us ever wanted apartheid. We all want, if it wasn't for this great cannabis, I never would have met the dagga couple. If it wasn't for cannabis, I never would have met many of my black and white friends that I currently have. It is this plant that has drawn us together. You know, Rastafarians, we have the song One Love. You know, that was just chosen, what was, I think in the year 2000, it was Song of the Millennium. Because that is the vibration that cannabis brings to people. It ignites your endocannabinoid system, and it just makes you more happy. And that is what all of us can testify. Now we all want a society where our people are happy. We want a society where our youths are employed. We want a society where our youths can feel invigorated and inspired by entering the cannabis industry, but where they are able to marry science with agriculture. Because cannabis allows us to do that. And we are saying, but why would governments all over the world be against the fact that people do this? Why is it that they want to keep us angry at one another? Why is it that they want to keep us sick? Why is it that they want to keep us unemployed? What purpose is served by that? And we are saying, as civil society, we can say no, but we must put a stop to this. Why is it that people are not allowed to cultivate? Why is it that we do not want people to develop a relationship with Mother Earth again? And one of the most beautiful ways in which you are able to do that is to plant a cannabis tree, is to plant a cannabis seed, in order for you to see how that seed grow in front of your eyes, in order for you to take care of it, to nurture it until it produces its fruits. There are few things in life that are more empowering and more beautiful than that, right there. And at the same time, you are doing your environment a service. Planting more trees just makes it much more easier for the rain to fall in your environment. Planting cannabis trees save the trees that currently we need to grow for 14, 15 years and then cut them down in order to make paper. The paper that you make from cannabis is 100 times more durable and 10 times less expensive to make. It is a no-brainer. But the reality is that there are vested interests that are fighting very hard to preserve the status quo. The fact that I've not been allowed to practice for the past 25 years is a crying shame. I am no threat to society. But for the past 25 years, I've not been allowed to practice my chosen profession. For the past 25 years, millions of people have been incarcerated. They've been put in jail. And let me tell you, to spend one night in jail is very dangerous. You could lose your life. You could catch an immutable disease, because that's the state of prisons. Prisons was never built to rehabilitate people. It was simply made to cage the undesirables within society. So we are saying, yes, we can arrest people, but only for the most serious of crimes. Arrest should not ever be used in relation to cannabis. Never ever. That is an abuse of power. We are saying that a constitutional democracy can only arrest in the most serious of circumstances, and that you completely need to remove cannabis from this whole sphere in order to ease up your court system, the amount of people that you have in your jail, millions that is saved every year as a result of police being able to focus their attention on serious crime, and getting your community, because if your community does not respect the police, the peace in your community is not going to increase. Because the people need to work with the police, and the police need to garner and they need to earn the respect of the people. And the people are the ones that need to agitate for their rights. They are the ones that need to be putting pressure on politicians to move away with the bureaucracy and to move away with the obstacles that are in the way of people getting with the plan, getting behind the plan, developing industry from the plan. It is right there. And we are at the verge of becoming an economic powerhouse in Africa if we get with the program ASAP. And to the Namibian government, as well as the South African government, the Namibian government can learn from the experiences of South Africa. Fortunate are the people that can learn from the experiences of others. And we are saying there is no better time than now. There is a paradigm shift that has occurred internationally. Let us ride this wave of positivity. We have been able to demonstrate to the people. Whenever people speak of cannabis now, they speak of a multi-billion pound, euro, dollar, rand industry. Why is it that Namibians or South Africans cannot also get some of those multi-billions? Why is it that we cannot simply determine our own destiny with what it is that we have? Cannabis grows in abundance all over South Africa. It might not be able to be, like your conditions here might not be as favorable, but there are many other partnerships that Namibia can have with South Africa and other African countries in order to build a green economy. People are speaking about a green economy, but they are too scared to talk about cannabis. You cannot talk about a green economy without speaking about cannabis. And we shouldn't be afraid because you are going to be labeled as a Dahatani or a Daharumpi simply because you promote the vision of the plant. We cannot. We need to move beyond this irrational fear And we need to demonstrate on a pragmatic and practical level to our governments that the fear that they've had in this regard has been irrational all along. And that if they are really interested in serving their people, there is no better way than forming a partnership with civil society. And this is where we can create a new model, a blueprint for the rest of the world to follow. Because they are all looking to South Africa and Southern Africa to develop something that the world has never seen. Let us make sure that there will never be again a situation where somebody has to suffer for 25 years, as I did, simply because that person wants to be what they want to be. We are saying cannabis now for all people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gareth. We really appreciate all your knowledge and insight. What we're going to do quickly is, if there's people in the audience who want to ask Gareth a question, we've got a mic over there and you can ask your questions. I think we have about 10 minutes, and then we're going to play you a video from another speaker, and there will be another question and answer bit. So please, yeah.
Yes, I, Rastafari. Yeah, welcome, special guest in the land of the brave. Thank you very much. My name is Brian Jafta. I'm the president of GAN, Ganja Users of Namibia. You know, Rastaman. I had to mention something about equality versus privacy. Equality is more. We should use it as a foundation in this struggle. And then the THCV, why is it more important than the THC? And then what advice can you give us to stop the current arrest, you know? Our people are going to jail like flies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. On behalf of all the cannabis.
My brother, yeah. So we not lose track, let me just attempt to answer the brother's questions. The notion of equality, my brother, right? You know the whole history of apartheid was where the indigenous people, black and brown people, were treated as lesser beings simply because they were brown or black. It had absolutely no reason or no sense behind it. And you find that the culture of the colonizers were the ones that were promoted with government resources. So there was absolutely no reason why alcohol or tobacco had to be promoted, or that these substances enjoyed the protection that they enjoyed under the previous regimes. We are now saying, if there is to be true equality, then it means that the tobacco of the indigenous people, which happens to be cannabis, ganja, must be put on the same level as those, and it must enjoy the same protection as those. So it means that they must have the same opportunities. Like now, as an indigenous person in my country, I sit there and I see foreigners, they sit on street side cafes, they drink beers, and they smoke tobacco, and they are left in peace. But if I dare to do that, police will run me down. So equality, if it has to have real meaning, means that the law cannot treat me lesser than these other people, right? The court decided not to articulate the right to equality because that would have involved a serious jurisprudential exercise. It was much easier for the courts to justify it on the basis of privacy, which was much more neutral and perhaps not so controversial. On the issue of THCV, it's not that it's more important than THC, it's just that you are able to produce stronger medicine. And because of our geographical position, Simply having the sun and our soil conditions makes cannabis, which are grown under our conditions, much more suitable for the manufacturing of alternative medicines. As such, that is why we will be able to ask a premium for the medicine that is produced right here in South Africa, and medicines that, because we need to challenge this European notion that they know better than us how to grow medicinal cannabis. Truth of the matter is that people have been coming to the southern parts of Africa to buy our cannabis for decades, and they come back every year to come and buy this stuff here. So if it wasn't good, they would not have come back. And that is the reality. So the ancient, the indigenous knowledge ways of growing cannabis, we need to develop those. And we are saying not that there's no space for good manufacturing practices, GMPs, or standard operating procedures, SOPs, but we are saying grow your cannabis according to your GMPs and your SOPs, and I'll grow mine according to my IKS, and then we test at the end of the day. Third question as to how do you stop the arrest? In the absence of government intervention, it is civil society that would have to make that move. And what we did in South Africa was to take them to court. Now, truth of the matter is that going to court is an expensive affair, my brother. If you do not have a public interest law firm, or if you do not have deep pockets, or if you do not have crowdfunding, one of those, then it is very, very difficult for an ordinary person to do that. I was fortunate in the sense that I got legal training, so I could do it myself at my own time and effort. And also because I was arrested, I didn't have a choice. I had to do this, otherwise I was facing 20 years in jail. And my crime was planting trees. That's what my government was prepared to send me to prison for 20 years, planting trees. But we give thanks for the fact that we secured the victory. The battle was hard and it was long, but victory was ours. Give thanks.
Well said. My name is Boron Dugula. I'm an activist for cannabis, the general of ganja users of Namibia. Myself, as you see me like this, I've been maybe arrested for cannabis possession and dealing on more than maybe 15 times. And to this day, I cannot understand what's so criminal about cannabis. But that's not what I want to talk about. Okay, but having experience or having been arrested, I always ended up in front of the courts. And when I go there, you know, my mother and father, they left this country to go to fight against the apartheid injustices. So, the way those people went to fight for land, but my mother and father in particular went to fight that obsolete apartheid laws or injustices must be done away with. So we have a Namibian constitution which is very, very clear on our fundamental rights and freedom that we have as citizens of Namibia, you see. But the thing is, when we go to court, sometimes you find out that the act that you are being persecuted for or with is very outdated. You hear when you are going for cannabis to court, first they tell you they are using Criminal Procedure Act 51 of 1977 in Namibia here as I speak. And then they tell you the act under which that you are charged is Act 41 of 1971. I have been reading this act over and over, and I was in disbelief because this act is so racist that is giving our police 21, which I think, and as I understood, has been changed in South Africa. So I want to know us now using this very outdated, obsolete Apartheid Act in comparison or using our fundamental rights and freedom, because in chapter 3, in the Namibian Constitution, it's...
I get you, my brother. The same laws are the ones that apply within South Africa. Those are the laws that we challenge. So, that is the same path that you would have to follow. So when you charged in criminal court, right, your defense is not that you're guilty or you're not guilty, because Namibia is also a constitutional democracy, right? Which means to say that you, every citizen, have the right to challenge any law. The Constitution, however, prescribes that there is a procedure whereby that should be done. So you will have to go through the whole court procedure which your Constitution prescribes. And the fact that these laws, yes, they've been in place in South Africa, it's the same Criminal Procedure Act, 51 of 77, the Drugs Act, 140 of 92. These were laws that were put in place before independence, right? But they are on the statutory books, whether you like it or not, and that there is a specific procedure that you must use in order to undo these laws. And that is the constitutional process that you guys will have to take if your government does not come to the party and do the right thing.
My name is John, I'm a local journalist. I just want to stay at this point for a moment. You know, under the Namibian Constitution, we don't have those explicit rights of privacy, as prescribed as under the South African Constitution. However, we do have very explicit rights to freedom of association. There is also a very specific law that outlaws any kind of discrimination. Now, your opinion here as a lawyer, if these two things can't be combined to make out a case that the anti-discriminatory legislation is basically undermining your right to freedom of association, as the rest of brothers here are surely entitled to, as everyone else here. What are your views here?
Well, indeed, you find that we argue that there were several laws that were violated by the old cannabis laws. And you only need to come home on one, right? So I've always argued that the equality and the dignity provisions, because those are the ones that are like intrinsically violated and limited as a result of these laws. We are saying that what dignity is there if you can be criminalized and arrested for making use of a plant? Who are you harming? Right? In a democracy, it is said that if the only harm is the harm to yourself, to the user, right? And that in itself is debatable. But if the only harm is to you as the user, what right does the government have to prescribe to you that in saying that, no, you should not be harming yourself this way? But if you smoke tobacco, it's okay, you can harm yourself according to that way. There is absolutely no equality, and what it simply does is that it elevates certain preferences, which more often than not are the preferences of the down-oppressive class within society, and it says that those are okay, but the preferences of the minorities or of the previously disadvantaged doesn't enjoy the same status, then there is something definitely wrong with that. So, I believe that the most strongest right is equality, but courts are quite reluctant because that opens up a whole can of worms at the end of the day. But the reality is that a balance has to be struck at the end of the day, and I think if the government are reluctant, then Namibians must simply get together, civil society, and launch this court action. and force government, if they do not want to, by their own volition, through pro-action, do this, well then they have to be reactive at the end of the day. But civil society should be proactive.
Okay. I think one last question.
All right, great. Good afternoon. Hi, Julian. I'm John Diaz. I'm just a participant, if I may say. Firstly, I'm so sorry. I'm late. Julian, I don't know whether you shared this particular piece of information with the entire crowd about next year, March, that the UN will decriminalize the entire ganja nonsense in any case. So everybody should just fall in line in any case. So all I'm saying is it's fine that we're lobbying, but it will be time wasting. All we just need to focus on in terms of Namibian law, the legislation, as I've studied it as well, is that we need to focus on the regulations that are stipulated in terms of our medicines as well as Controlled Substances Control Act. That's the only thing that we need to do in order to specify exactly how the cannabis industry should be regulated. Because right now what has happened in the current act that is currently regulating our system is that it has convoluted the pharmaceutical components as well as the veterinarian and cannabis together, clustered them all together in the same thing. It basically just makes the entire system cumbersome to really penetrate. I know there's a couple of people who applied to basically harvest and grow this particular plant, but then the medical council just rejected the applications without any reasons furnished. And on top of that, this entire appeal process is also within the act, but nobody has utilized it. Nobody has even taken the council to court to really enforce as to why is it that they don't want to give us the permission to do so. So it was just a contribution rather than the question. So all I'm just saying is that the entire decriminalization process is coming, and from the UN, obviously everybody will implement it. So that in itself just means that we need to focus on the local legislation to make sure that we implement this thing as smoothly as possible. Thank you.
Thanks for that contribution, brother. I personally believe that we in Africa, in South Africa, we need to challenge the perception, especially this notion around medicinal cannabis, and then thinking that we should apply the same standards when measuring other medicines. Truth of the matter is that when it comes to traditional allopathic medicines, is that there is a dire need for the strict level of compliance that currently exists, because if you overdose on any of these medicines, you die. Whereas there is absolutely no proof that you can die from an overdose of cannabis. That is something that has not been medically demonstrated. And to say that cannabis medicines must be held to the same standard as Western allopathic medicines is a flawed argument. And we are saying that indigenous knowledge ways and indigenous knowledge medicine cannot be held bound to that same standard there, because simply, and especially in relation to cannabis, it is not toxic. Therefore, you find that we need to develop an alternative regulatory framework for cannabis. As somebody was saying very passionately earlier on, it's our food. That's what's happening, and once you apply the label of medicine to it, then immediately a whole set of other standards come into play, because people, we all believe medicine should be safe, and we all agree with that. But we are saying not to the same level as you need to hold Western allopathic medicines, because currently that particular medicine, although regulated and strictly regulated, is the 5th largest source of preventable death on earth. Medicine prescribed by your doctor, issued by the pharmacist, is the 5th largest cause of preventable death. In 5,000 years of recorded cannabis history, there is not one reported case of anyone that has died as a result of an overdose of cannabis. So all of these restrictions currently is simply to prevent ordinary people from entering the market, because it would seem in the past that only white people can profit of pain and death, because they were allowed to become billionaires on the back of alcohol and tobacco. But now that it seems a couple of brown and black people stand to make money from cannabis, suddenly we have to put all of these regulations in place. I don't agree with that.
Thank you so much, Gareth. What an honor for basically to have you here and to share all your knowledge and your passion with us, and for speaking out, you know, about the injustice of what is currently happening with cannabis, especially towards people of color. So this is also something that we will focus on throughout. The next presentation is going to be about hemp, and it's Tony Budden from Hemporium in South Africa, who will do about a 5-minute video, and then there will be space for about 5 minutes for question and answer time.
Good day and greetings to people of Namibia. My name is Tony Budden. I'm a cannabis expert from South Africa and have spent most of my life involved with the industrial hemp parts of this plant. We started our company Hemporium in 1996, and basically with the idea of showcasing what this plant can offer, not only around the medicinal use or the adult use of this plant, but also around the industrial use, around creating jobs out of the plant, out of creating clothing and textiles out of the fiber, paper, the nutritional side from the seed, the building materials for housing, and also cosmetics and a whole host more that you can get out of this very beneficial plant. Our journey has been a long one, and we created a company that made all of these products in South Africa but had to import our materials from the East, from Germany, from Spain, from the UK, Canada, and all the while we've really been pushing for change so that we can get our materials here in Africa. The benefits of the plant from the industrial side are numerous. Firstly, when the plant grows, obviously on the environmental side, you have a plant that's growing from seed to harvest in about 4 months and gets up to 4 meters tall, sometimes even taller, and all that time it's absorbing carbon, so it really has a climate change mitigating effect as well. Now, the main product that people knew from this plant is the textile side, and the fibers in the bark of the stalk are 3 times stronger than cotton, and it's grown organically with ease, so it doesn't need the pesticides and the chemicals that cotton needs in order to grow, and is much better as far as using water goes. You also get a lot more fiber per acre of land than you would of cotton. So there are many reasons to use it to create fiber for textiles and for paper as well. The seeds of the plant as well have a huge opportunity for food, and they're full of a protein called globulin edestin. It's a very digestible protein, very good as an alternative source for wheat protein, and it's full of omega fatty acids, for omega 3, 6 and 9. And basically the benefits of that are it helps your immune system operate properly and modulate the immune system. And it's also got very beneficial oils for the skin. Basically mimics the skin's oil, so it's used in cosmetics and soaps and shampoos, obviously lotions. And that's the biggest industry in Canada from hemp is they're using it for food, oils and protein. On top of that, you get the inside of the stalk that's left over after you take the fiber off, and that is used for building materials. My house is made from hemp. I'm very happy to have lived in a hemp house for about the last 8 years. It is obviously super sustainable. You're growing a house in 4 months, and you mix it with lime to make a natural cement. It is much better insulating for heat and cold. It's a lightweight building material, and especially in a resource deficient or resource scarce area like areas of Namibia where you don't have a lot of access to wood and other building materials. You could be growing houses there as well. And in my house, just as an example of what we did to show what this plant can do, is basically the house is made out of hempcrete, which is mixed with lime. It uses hemp chipboard, particle board made from compressed hemp stalk, for all the cupboards and the cabinets and everything. And we've got hemp carpets made out of fiber, we've got hemp curtains, hemp cushions, hemp lampshades. The wood is oiled with hemp seed oil, and we really showed a way that this plant can offer so much for us without damaging the environment. On the textile side, the clothing is much stronger than cotton, it's more durable, it lasts, and it's organic by nature. And then obviously you've got the food side as well. So it is my advice that we look at changing the laws not only in Namibia but the whole of Southern Africa. We have a great climate to grow this plant, we have endless space, and we have people that really need to get the jobs and the investment that will be needed to make all of these products. And on top of all of that, on the industrial side, we also have the CBD market, which is a massive market that is growing using CBD, which is a non-psychoactive compound found in the cannabis plant. It does the opposite effect of THC. It actually can help mitigate some of the psychoactive effects of THC when people are using it medically, but still need to be active. And that market is just exploding around the world. You're seeing it in everything from CBD coffee, CBD tinctures, drinks, patches, the works, and it is a massive, massive market and a high-value product that can be taken out of the hemp plant and put into a whole range of products. And again, stimulating job creation and creating investment. The laboratories and extraction facilities that will be needed to take the CBD out of the flowers of the plant and produce all these products will stimulate the economy as well. You obviously have heard today from others around the medicinal uses of this plant, and that's huge from THC and CBD, and obviously will benefit our ailing healthcare system in Africa by providing a plant that is available, cheap, and can offer a lot of comfort and relief to people who are in need and don't have access to pharmaceutical medicines or would like to get away from taking pharmaceutical medicines. So I really cannot stress highly enough just how beneficial this plant is, how much has changed my life, and how much I have learned over the last 20 odd years of working with it, and still am amazed every year. There are new uses, there's hemp plastics, hemp fuels, obviously the whole medicinal side that we're seeing just how beneficial it is and how many people it's helping, from old people to young people and everyone in between. And then also looking at the uses of negating the impacts, the negative impacts of our war on drugs, which has been a war on people. And we have seen that the war on drugs has not worked. We haven't got control of it. And instead of having a black market where the only benefits are going to not into our fiscus, not into any sorts of tax, not into any sorts of investment, but basically with the right regulations we can create an industry that benefits all the inhabitants of our region, from creating investment, from creating awesome products without harming the environment, and definitely inspiring a host of development of products that are green, sustainable, beneficial to us, beneficial to our planet. And in time with what's happening around the world, we had seen the opportunities open with Canada, with America, with Uruguay, and a lot of Europe now allowing this plant to be free again. And we think it's definitely time that Southern Africa takes control and takes advantage of all of the beautiful sunshine, the amazing land that we have, and the incredible people that we can use to build a world-leading region when it comes to the cannabis industry. So sorry I couldn't be with you in person this time. I really look forward to being up there soon, and I wish you all well for the conference and for setting up a legal, regulated, beautiful, sustainable industry in Namibia. Thank you. Keep it green.
Thank you so much to Tony Budden from Hemporium. So we are not going to do the question and answer time with Tony, unfortunately, because we're running a little bit behind schedule already. And I was going to get my brothers from Ganja Users Namibia, Bija and Boro, to come up and have a word, but we're going to have to check if we have time for that at the end, okay? So we're going to go to the Daha couple now. And then we have another surprise guest from California calling in for the grand finale. But for now, Jules and Myrtle, who have been absolutely amazing in their support so far of what's been going on in Namibia. They've been guiding us who are on the ground doing activism, encouraging us, informing us. So thank you so much to them and all the work they do, and also really honored to have them here. And I will give you guys the stage to, tell your story.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. We are totally honored to be here. We were so excited. You know, we've just come back from almost a month on the west coast of America. And I can tell you that we were more excited to leave home and drive to Windhoek than we were to fly to California, because this is just one of our most favorite places in the whole world. So it's really, really great to be here. Now, as you can see, our non-profit company is called Fields of Green for All. And we mean that. My email address is myrtle@fieldsofgreenforall.org.za, and I make you type that out every time, so that we can remind people that our campaigns are about basic human rights, as Gareth so rightly explained for us. Our campaigns are not just for those people who are rich and have got licenses and have got land to grow weed. Our campaign is for all South Africans, all Southern Africans, and as we said, we spoke at Seattle Hempfest in front of 50,000 people. We said we want fields of green for all the world's citizens. So that was also one of the reasons why we were so excited to come here, because you're our neighbors, you're our brothers and sisters. We've got to do this together. Our road along the path to cannabis legalization started on the 5th of August 2010 at 2 o'clock in the morning, when the police somehow managed to breach our security, bash down our kitchen door, and arrest us on charges of possession and dealing in drugs. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about the trauma that was that arrest, but if you go to the Dahu Couple YouTube channel, you can watch our CV, which is our TEDx talk, which we did in Cape Town in 2015. There we relive the horrors of that arrest. And that's now 8 years ago, and what a journey it's been. It really has been a hell of a thing. It's taken us all around the world. It's taken us all over Africa. We've learned a lot. We've met fantastic people. And today we just want to explain to you where we are right now and maybe inspire you a bit for the journey forward.
It's not a simple process. That is me outside the Pretoria High Court in 2017, surrounded by my detractors. They were all hired by a fundamental Christian conservative group that own a string of rehabs around the country, and they hate, loathe and despise everything to do with the Dhaka Couple. They've got a real issue with us. But the reason we put this up here is there is no yes-no answer. Do you want it to be legal? What on earth does that mean? What is the difference between legalization and what is decriminalization? We're going to get into that as we go along. I've got one question to ask the whole group. Who does not use cannabis products in this room? Who is not using cannabis for any particular reason? So I take it that everybody in this room uses cannabis products. Now you see, this is a Namibian story. You're all scared to death. You are all scared by the man. And if you don't transcend your fear, you're not going to get anywhere. I'm going to ask you the same question. Who doesn't use cannabis products in this room? Thank you for being honest. So what I'm going to tell you now is we come in peace. And we're going to welcome you into our world of cannabis, because it's not a bad place. We're not evil stoners. In fact, this is cognitive dissonance. Between us, we have used cannabis for a total of 87 years between us. I have personally been using cannabis for 44 years, pretty much every day of my life. So I have been driving stoned all of my life. But when they say, do you drive stoned? How on earth did I get here? So what we're going to do is tell you a little story about our journey from Myrtle in 2010, the cops booting down the door. And what was happening in South Africa for the last 8 years is there was two parallel courses. There was this gentleman here, and there was us two. This man was banging against the door of the Pretoria High Court at exactly the time, the Western Cape High Court in Cape Town. And we were banging on the doors of the High Court in Pretoria in this parallel journey for 6 or 7 years. Gareth got there first with Jeremy Acton, and this happened. And we've got to take our hats off to this guy for actually going through the motions for 19 years. So the walls started falling down in March 2017, and it had to go to the Constitution. And in that time, we actually ended up in a court of law. But it wasn't until, you see this polarized thing here, some people love it, some people hate it. And in this room, it'll be exactly the same thing. You either love it or hate it. There has to be a middle ground. So that is me with the day after this man ruptured the last apartheid law. These were the headlines. We get a green light. Oh, but the critics were puffing mad. So on our parallel journey, we ended up in the Pretoria High Court around about 3 months after this gentleman banged down the door in his part of the world. And Myrtle's going to tell you a little bit about the journey that we did in Pretoria.
So when we were arrested, and this I think might answer some of the questions in terms of the laws and the process. When we were arrested, we basically had 3 choices. The first choice would have been to accept our punishment, okay? At that stage, some kind of two-bit lawyer said to us that we were looking at about 7 to 10 years in jail. We were arrested, just by the way, with 1.87 kilograms of dagga in our roof. It was August, so the silly cops didn't know that we weren't growing at that time. They spent like about 5 hours trying to find the lab. They kept on going on, Varsity lab, you know, I won't say exactly what they said, okay? So we could have accepted our punishment was the first choice, okay? The second choice, being South Africa, is we could have paid the bribe. And we looked into it. I believe in me, it would have cost 40,000 Rand each to bribe our way out of it and get the charges dropped. But then they would have been back. You know, they would have been back. They would have said, oh, those people have got money to just dish out in a bribe. Let's go and bust them next year again. So that wasn't really an option. And then the third option was actually to fight the law. So the first, I don't want to take too long over all this legal stuff, but our first step to do was to get what is called a stay in prosecution. So you need to go to the Namibian High Court if you're arrested and get a stay in prosecution so that they put your charges on hold. Then that allows you leave to then sue the government. Then you have to sue the government, all the government departments that are involved with cannabis in every way, agriculture, forestry, whatever, all your government departments, then you sue them all. It's a very, very long, very, very expensive process, and we're very lucky to have had pro bono lawyers. So that is what we did. And in July 2011, we were granted our stay of prosecution. We then issued summons on the government, and it was only 6 years later that we actually had our day in court. There were numerous postponements. That's one of the reasons why Jeremy and Gareth actually overtook us, and it was never a race. We were always working together. So Jeremy and Gareth in the Western Cape decided to go by way of application, which means that you put all the papers into court and you have all of your evidence on paper and then the court decides. We decided to go by way of trial, where you get expert witnesses in and you have cross-examination. So we had experts across all of the various cannabis fields, responsible adult use, traditional, cultural and religious use, industrial use, and health uses. We hate the word medical marijuana. It's health. It's a healthful plant. It helps your health. So we got experts from all around the world. Unfortunately, to cut a long story short, the government fully busted us out of court, and after 14 court days, we ran out of time. So that was very sad. We were absolutely shattered. At least we did have a bit of the evidence in. And here you can see our absolutely amazing legal team. Look how young they are. They're all under the age of 40. That's what needs to happen in Namibia. We need to round up all of the young people. Those are the people who have got the 21st century minds, they've got the enthusiasm and they've got the energy. We absolutely love our legal team from Shippers Attorneys in Johannesburg. And there we are sitting in court with our star witness, who is Professor David Nutt. And he came over from Imperial College in London, and he is what we call our scale of harms expert. But more about that later. This was a headline during Professor David Nutt's testimony in court. And this is the crux of our argument. As Gareth said, you cannot possibly keep cannabis illegal when tobacco and alcohol are illegal. It is a no-brainer. So then, that led us through, Gareth and Jeremy had already got their decision in the Western Cape. We ran out of time in Pretoria, and then eventually, after 10 months of waiting, the Constitutional Court had their decision. We all rushed up to Joburg. We were actually doing presentations in PE at the time. We jumped on the first plane in the morning. We went up to the Constitutional Court, and there you have it. Our beautiful, beautiful Constitutional Court building in Johannesburg. And there's the four of us outside. So, I'm not sure what this is. So, the Constitutional Court is a really interesting building because the judges sit down there and the people sit up here. So it's like reverse psychology. It's also built on the site of the old apartheid jail. And what they did is they took down all the bricks, they cleaned them up, and they used those very same bricks to build the Constitutional Court. So it's a very significant building, and we just love it. Whenever we have visitors to Johannesburg, we always take them to go and visit the court. And this is the court that granted that amazing privacy judgment. And down at the bottom there, you can see Brother Gareth, Brother Jeremy, and all of our legal team. And as Fields of Green for All and the Dhaka couple, we intervened in their judgment. So we kind of all got that judgment together.
Again, the press went crazy. And let's face it, in South Africa, the press love us. We've never ever had any negative press. In all the time we've been doing this, the South African press has been very kind to us, which is more than I can really say for the Namibian press at the moment. The Namibian press has got a lot of work to do to up their game and bring out both sides of the story. Because at the moment, all they're doing is beating their chests about the amount of pillage and the amount of arrests and the amount of incarcerations and detentions. That's the only headlines we ever hear from Namibia. This is a classic. It broke down the barriers of everything. That was in a national newspaper the next day. And if anybody in here thinks cannabis is a gateway drug, you've got a Constitutional Court lawyer that has got a 700-page document that begs to differ. This is our mantra from our international drug policy work, because now, as Gareth mentioned, the government has been given 2 years within which to rewrite these offensive laws, because we sued them because we told them the laws are offensive. We actually said what was the word we used? The laws were irrational, thank you. They are irrational laws. And when you tell that to a legal fraternity, they don't deal in irrationality. Everything has to be rational. So they don't like that word, and that's the reason we used the word. There will be nothing about the laws of cannabis in South Africa without civil society being engaged. Otherwise, it'll be another version of prohibition, mark my words. So the way we've done it is to force their hand by producing a document. This is version 1. Version 2 is over there for sale. It is now, in this form, a 40-page document, and on the 18th of September this year, which is the 1-year anniversary of the judgment, this document will become A4 and twice its size. So we're working on a 90-page document in A4 to give to the communities and basically to give to the government so they can pick the bones out of our document, because if we sit on our laurels, they are going to produce a prohibition document that we're going to have to pick apart, so we're going to get there first. So we encourage all of you afterwards to go and have a look at this document. Please purchase this document and go home and read it and work out your plan around these plans for Namibia in general.
That document, we always call it 5 years of Sundays, because we're not really policy people or legal people or anything. We just wrote this thing from the heart. And then since we brought out the discussion document, we've been consulting all the experts who've been helping us to expand this into, I think with diagrams in the end, it's going to be about 120 pages. We'll then raise money we'll release it in PDF form, and only Namibia knows this now, not South Africa, next week on the anniversary of the judgment. And then we'll have to raise the money to print it, because it's really expensive. But everybody knows that hard copy works, and we want to print at least 5,000 to distribute through the whole of Southern Africa. But in order to write these regulations, we have to make the point that you need, as Namibians, you need to know what you want. Because we always say, like the old Joe Jackson song, for those people of my generation, you can't get what you want unless you know what you want. And we found in traveling around South Africa that you say to people, okay, what do you want the regulation to look like? And they're like, People don't know what they want because they don't know the subject. So we've been trying to train people in South Africa to know what they want. Now, in order to know what you want, you need to know what the situation looks like right now. So you need to look at your Namibian cannabis, underground, black market, unregulated, whatever you want to call it, industry. You need to analyze that so you know what your starting point is. So that's what we did.
This is a schematic of kind of how it is at the moment. Many of you in the room will have no idea what it is to grow cannabis because you're in Namibia. It's a very, very brutal prohibitionist regime. You are an enemy of the state the minute you germinate a seed. So, the cultivation, trade and use of cannabis in South Africa is as follows. In the top left-hand corner there you say indoor greenhouse and outdoors. Those are the three basic principles of growing cannabis. If you are wanting to engage in growing medical-grade cannabis to treat people with a barcode at your local discount, you will have to grow your cannabis in a very, very solid environment, indoors, with no pests, no bugs, no hojos, no outside elements, and create the same cannabis time and time again, because when you go to the shop for medicine, you expect it to be exactly the same as it was last time. And that's what medical cannabis is. So that's what we call indoor. There's a lot of fallacy around this indoor thing. In South Africa, an indoor cannabis farm is called a Daga lab. It's a laboratory to make frankenweed so we can sell it to school children outside school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's what they think a lab is. We are manufacturing something evil to give to our children. Couldn't be further from the truth. But for my money, after growing cannabis on my property in Johannesburg for 3 decades now, in exactly the same place, greenhouse cannabis rules the world, and it will do so in Namibia. And the reason we call it greenhouse is we have to put some shade over the top of it, primarily to stop the hailstones in our part of the world, because one 20-minute hailstorm in Johannesburg will trash your plants and you'll be back to square one. It's not specifically a greenhouse to create an environment, it's a greenhouse to create safety for your plants. And the outdoor element is the 99% of the growers in South Africa are putting pips in the ground and they're growing fields of green as far as the eye can see. And make no mistake, Judge Zondo said that you can go home and cultivate, and South Africa has taken that judge really seriously. Everywhere we go in South Africa, there's weed everywhere. They are growing the place crazy. I promise you, in the Ponderland 2 months ago, I stood on a hill and it was a drought, so it's brown, but everywhere you see for 20 k's down that valley is pockets of green and green and green and green and green. It's as far as the eye can see for hundreds of years, and they think they can arrest us all. Ha. Bottom left, Myrtle touched on what we call the 4 platforms. Those are the 4 reasons we are doing it. But we do not have an argument about those reasons. We asked Tony Budden, we asked Mr. Lawyer Friend here. We are human rights activists. It is my human right to ingest whatever I want. That's our ticket. However, that won't do in front of the judge. It's part of my evidence, my personal evidence and my testimony, but responsible adult use, traditional cultural use, health and industrial uses are the 4 platforms to get this legalized in whatever form it becomes. Have a look at the middle right-hand side. It says there are 900,000 farmers. Can you believe that? There are 900,000 sustainable cannabis farmers in South Africa alone. Now, is the government going to go and count their plants? Is the government going to give them a license? And what would be the point of giving them a license? Top right, personal use, small scale and high end. These all fall into the same brackets of the way that you are growing the plant. The better you grow the plant, and in a prohibition paradigm, the stronger the plant, the more bucks you can charge for the plant. That's a paradigm that the government has created all on their own. If you prohibit something, it becomes more expensive. Hello? It always did and it always will. There's so much money in the underground. The drug lords are making millions. Well, all you've got to do, government, any government, all you've got to do is legally regulate it. The price will fall. Guaranteed. We've just been to America for 3 weeks. Their price is dropping hand over fist. It has to.
I don't know if you noticed there was a little, maybe I'll just go back so you can see it's quite an important point. The bottom there it says, the success of a country's drug policy is directly proportional to the size of its black market. So if you are like California, where you have legal cannabis, okay, and you have a successful legalization, regulation, rules, okay, then it goes that you should only have a small black market. But now we usually ask all people the same questions everywhere we go. And in America we asked everybody, so how's the black market doing? And everywhere where we went, they said, it is thriving, it is bigger than ever. Okay? So that is something for Namibians to bear in mind. If you want to get rid of what you now call the criminal element, okay, if you want to get rid of the violence and the underhandedness and the breaking of the laws and everything that goes with keeping cannabis illegal, then you have to regulate it very, very carefully. Because if you regulate it too strictly and you impose licenses and plant counting and seed counting and all of this stuff on your people, I promise you the black market has been doing this for a very long time, and they will carry on doing what they want, and they will not join your regulated system. And then you're back at square one. So it's very, very important. Do not, I'll touch on this later, do not go the way that Lesotho and Zimbabwe have gone and sell all their licenses to foreigners. It won't work. So we've got a plan. First of all, you have to start with some principles. It's very important that you have these principles that form the foundation of your regulation so that you can always go back to them as a checklist. Are your cannabis regulations in proportion to those of alcohol and tobacco. You need proportionality across all the substances, if it were. Are you certain of these laws? You need a degree of certainty. Look where we're sitting in South Africa. We've got this really grey area, and it's such a pain. Because Judge Zondo, in his judgment in September last year, said you are allowed to use and cultivate cannabis for personal use in private spaces. He specifically said that we are not allowed to trade in cannabis. So we are stuck in this awful grey area where the police have got far too much authority, and they go around and find somebody growing 5 plants, and they say, oh, you're going to smoke 1 plant and you're going to sell the other 4, and then they arrest them. So we need certainty to avoid these grey areas. We need flexibility. We need to put all of our civil society, put all of our cards on the table, ask for the best possible scenario, be patient and be flexible. You might have to start with a little bit less and then get a little bit more a few years down the line, but be flexible. It's very important for us as civil society. We need our regulations to be durable. We don't want to make a law now like they did in Canada. No smoking in public, no smoking rooms, no cafes, no coffee shops, no nothing. If you're going to smoke, you've got to stay at home. What about the tourists? When we were in Los Angeles, we smoked nearly no weed because the only place that we could smoke was in our Airbnb. And then we were out all day. We weren't going to spend all that money going to America and sit in our Airbnb smoking weed, were we? But when we were out there in the world, in Los Angeles, there was nowhere to smoke. So isn't that a bit silly? So now, California and some of the other states, Colorado and some places in Canada, are starting to rewrite the law to allow public consumption areas. So that durability is very important, to have a bit of transparency and accountability, something that's very, very important here in our neck of the woods. I know South Africa is going through a terrible, terrible corruption scandals at the moment. We have to watch the regulators with eyes of hawks. It must be transparent and accountable. No meetings behind closed doors. Every single meeting about cannabis must be live streamed, televised, recorded, shared on social media. We want absolute transparency and accountability. Otherwise, they'll go behind closed doors, they'll make a law, and they'll come out and say, here you go. It's not going to work.
On the 31st of December, like we do with the tax.
Exactly. We need capable regulators, and by capable regulators we need people who use cannabis to regulate cannabis. People who grow cannabis to regulate cannabis. We don't need somebody who knows nothing about weed to suddenly now go and impose the laws on us. I love these principles, I can go on forever. We need foresight, we need to be able to try and predict what's going to happen in the future and look at that. We need relevance to our social context. We are not California, we are not Colorado or Israel or Uruguay. We need South African, Southern African, Namibian solutions. We need a specific set of aims, and we set out a few little aims. We need access to improved and affordable health care, which is quite possible with cannabis. We need reduced drug-related crime, because there are elements in the cannabis industry that are criminals. We need to reduce that, and just by not making all of us criminals, we'll reduce drug-related crime, won't it? We need to protect the young and the vulnerable. There should be an age limit. We suggest that it's 18. In some states in America it's 21. I think 18 is quite reasonable, unless that minor needs the cannabis for medicine. And that is up to the parents, not the doctors. We need to protect our human rights, those human rights that the gentleman at the back was talking about. There's lots of human rights listed within your Namibian constitution. And we need to provide good value for money. By good value for money, I don't say, oh, Namibia needs to sell cheap weed. What I mean is the regulations must provide good value for money for the taxpayer. So you don't want to go and spend 25% of the Namibian tax purse on trying to regulate cannabis. We need simple solutions that are not expensive. We don't need 40 cannabis ministers, for example. So let's not make this bloated. Let's make this effective for our tax purse.
Have a quick look at this. This is another sort of drug policy mantra from around the world. This is about how the difference between prohibition and laissez-faire trade. At the moment in Namibia, you can see that arrow in the top left. That's where you are. It is a blanket, evil prohibition on the plant with no quarter. But if you look it down at the bottom where that orange line is, it says responsible legal regulation. In society in the Western world, that's kind of where alcohol and tobacco are. It's not perfect, but it does mean that it's more difficult for a child to get a packet of tobacco or a bottle or a quart or some ethanol in the bottle store, and that is what we mean about this regulation spectrum. So right now in South Africa, the orange line at the bottom on the left-hand side, it says decriminalization and harm reduction. So now we're edging from the left-hand side of prohibition and we're moving to the right into that orange band where human rights and harm reduction is taking place, and we are now in a de facto decriminalized state. I can walk around South Africa with weed in my pocket and the man can't get me. I can get on a plane and fly to Cape Town with weed in my suitcase. That man can't touch me. I can drive anywhere I want in the Republic of South Africa with weed in my bakkie, and guess what? He can't touch me. And that's de facto decriminalization. That's your first step. Anybody moving to South Africa? Right at the very beginning we said yes, no. It's not a yes, no. All of those different figures over there are different forms of legalization. It's legal for this, but it's not legal for that. You can have medicine, but you can't have it for so-called recreation. So there's all these different paradigms as people and governments around the world are grappling with this situation of trying to break down the doors of this blanket prohibition that the United Nations ordained in 1961. So it's actually out of date because of our judgment. But that is what we're trying to put across, the fact that it is a complex situation, and maybe Namibia has its own set of rules for your specific prohibition. I love this girl, she's great. This one, check this girl out here. She's very important, this one.
In my own mind. So one of the things we also realized right at the beginning of our campaign is that we needed to put South Africa on the international drug policy map, because we don't operate in a vacuum. So we were invited to join something which is called the Vienna NGO Committee, because remember right in the beginning we registered the NGO. So I know that Michael and Angela and everybody and the ganja users and everywhere are working. They have the name already, they've got a beautiful logo, and they're busy, they've registered the company, they're going to get a website, so you guys are on the road. Then, hopefully, they will be able to join the Vienna NGO Committee. There's also a New York NGO Committee, and this is where drug policy in general and cannabis law reform is discussed on the international level. So what we did is, without any invitation, in 2016, we went to New York. We sold enough weed to go to New York. And we attended something that was called UNGAS, which was the United Nations General Assembly Special Session on Drugs. And we arrived there and we wore our Africa t-shirts, and we just went and introduced ourselves to people. Hello, we're Jules Myrtle, we come from South Africa, and this is what we do, and we sue in the government. And with that, we made connections, connected business cards, emails backwards and forwards, and we established South Africa on the International Drug Policy Network. And now in Vienna, every year in March, is something called C&D, which is the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. And that is the part of the United Nations that decides on these international schedules that they use to classify drugs, which are as outdated as our cannabis laws in South Africa and in Namibia. So it's important as activists that we go to Vienna every year in March to have our say, because they have these big meetings with all of the different country representatives. And you can imagine it's a very difficult environment because you have 152 different countries represented there. And you have countries like Russia and Iran and Indonesia coming up against countries like Canada, Uruguay and the Netherlands, all in the same room, and they're all meant to have consensus about drugs. So these big meetings are really, really boring, okay? And they go on and on and on, and they say the same thing over and over again, having a meeting about a meeting, as it were. But in Vienna, they have something which is called side events. And the side events are organized by NGOs. And that is why we've been going to Vienna for the last 3 years, because you learn so much in the side events. So this is an invitation to Namibians to please support your activists, so that in March next year, and we haven't got very much time, as Fields of Green for All, we will make sure that the United Nations passes are organized for your activists, but send at least 2 people to Vienna in March, please. And even more importantly for this March is CND, the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, the various countries, 86 of the 152 countries are voting on cannabis descheduling. So they want to take it out of the highest, most dangerous dependence-producing schedule at the UN, and they want to lower it. It's complicated, there's gazillions of documents around the issue, but these 52 countries are voting in March next year, and South Africa is one of the countries that is voting. And so it would be really nice to have 1 or 2 Namibian representatives in Vienna in March for CMD, please. And then something else that we've been doing with our NGO friends in Vienna is we have produced this document, and it's called Cannabis and Sustainable Development. Now, as you might know, the United Nations has put forward the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is for all countries, member states of the United Nations, to strive towards in order to attain development. And they're also quite boring because they keep on moving the goalposts. So when we first started this, there were Sustainable Development Goals for 2015. Now we've got SDGs for 2030. So, and they're the same sort of things, you know, equality and all of that. But if you look at the 20-odd Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 of those goals that cannabis can solve. And so that was recognized by the European NGOs, and they came up with this booklet, which is really very important for your governments. Because if your government, like Namibia, is a member state at the UN, they will know about Sustainable Development Goals. So when activists, like all these beautiful people here, are working with the government, try and talk their language. Talk about Sustainable Development Goals and how 17 of those goals can be achieved through the legalization of cannabis. So that is what this document is all about, and we're very proud to be part of it.
Dr. David Nutt, Professor David Nutt in the High Court in Pretoria came up with that headline: if you are going to criminalise cannabis users, you should criminalise alcohol users, because that is his definitive scale of harms. And it is no surprise to anybody in the room, at the top of the tree is alcohol. It is a very, very destructive substance, not only for the person that's using it, but for everybody around them. And that's the point, for everybody around them. Look at cannabis there, it's like number 9 on the list, tobacco's above it. So we are basing all of our drug policy work on this scale of harms. And this is why we want to take this to the government, because you cannot legislate cannabis any more harshly than you do alcohol, because it's not as harsh as alcohol. So when the government says, well, you can grow 6 plants and we're going to come and count them. When was the last time you had 10 bottles of brandy in your house and the government came to count them? What about all the tobacco you've got in your house? Have you ever seen a government representative come and check how many cigarettes you've got? You see? So we base this is our mantra, the scale of harms. And this is a bit of nitty-gritty about how we want to produce cannabis and put it into the mainstream. Because remember, cannabis in South Africa is worth billions already because we've got a highly organised underground market that has been in existence for 600 years. It is so clever, they can get trucks into Namibia full of weed every single day of the week for the last 50 years. Of course it's organised crime. It's very organised. And we're proud of it. So you've got to take all of that system and bring it into the open.
There's not too much that needs to change, really, and so we've taken our analysis of what the South African cannabis market looks like, and we've translated it into a way that it can be regulated by the government. So everything starts with the growers. The growers they're the people that put the seed in the ground. There's different types of growers. Commercial ones, industrial, growing hemp, in-house growers, which we'll talk about a little bit later with our private clubs model. So something that's a closed loop system, you grow and you use, consume, sell and everything in the same place. You can have cooperative growers where a whole lot of farmers get together and they pool their resources. Or you can have subsistence growers where you just grow at home for your own personal needs. And then of course you have traditional growers, which is something that's unique to Africa. So what happens now, the farmers, the cultivators, the growers, they grow the weed, then what happens to that? They take, the farmers take their cannabis and they take it to something that's called a hub. Now, we're having a little bit of an argument with our legal team at the moment because they say we must call this a co-op. We say, no, we want to call it a hub because it's specific to cannabis. But anyway, a hub, co-op, whatever the word is. At this co-op, much like a mini co-op, you know, if you're driving through South Africa and you go past those little Freestart towns, and you always see those silos first, before, as you're going along the road, you know, oh, there's a mini hub. So that's exactly what most agricultural produce uses, a system of a co-op. So at the hub can be responsible for annual certification to make sure that you are using best farming practice, quality control. Each hub could have testing machines, or we could have mobile testing machines to keep up with the quality control for more outlying rural areas. Hubs could deal with warehousing. If you have a big operation, you don't necessarily want to keep your finished product at your farm, so there could be warehousing and storage facilities. There could be a system to use the byproducts of cannabis, which are incredibly useful. For example, if you are producing adult use cannabis, what happens to the stalks and the leaves and the roots of those plants when you're only using the flower? Those are very useful elements to the plant. Maybe those can be dealt with at the hub too. What about tax? It's very difficult for small cannabis businesses to be tax compliant. If you belong to a hub, you could pay your tax at source. Now there's people that say that we shouldn't be paying tax on cannabis, but what we're saying is it shouldn't be a sin tax. It shouldn't be a tax that is so high that people are now just going to try and evade it. It needs to be a basic at-source agricultural tax, just so that we can keep our regulation system going. And then right at the bottom, the hub could also deal with what is called an anonymous auction. So they use the anonymous auction model in Zimbabwe for the tobacco, and it's really good, a good system to guard against price fixing. Okay. So what you could do is at the end of the outdoor harvest season, all of the growers bring their plant product there and it's auctioned off to the highest bidder. So the hub system is probably the center of what we would like the regulations in South Africa to look like. And then obviously that when the cannabis leaves the hub, it needs to be distributed. And I'm not going to go into all the different things, all in the book. And then from there needs to be regulations for retail. We see up the road here in Windhoek, there's already a CBD pharmacy. Not quite sure what that's all about, but that is obviously, that CBD pharmacy has got some regulations attached to it, and it's a retail outlet. So we need retail outlets for all the different types of cannabis products. Then, if you take the existing underground black market, criminal, whatever you want to call it, business in South Africa, and you put it next to the regulations that we are proposing in this, next to each other like that, you can see that they're not actually too different. We don't want to take our existing cannabis industry and make it change too much, too fast, because then people are just going to rather stay with what they know and just rather operate under the law. So that's, we can't stress that point enough. We don't need too much change. We don't need stuff imposed from above on us.
Okay, another question. Audience participation. Who wants a cannabis license? Why?
No, thank you.
Why do you think you need a license to grow a plant? You've fallen into their trap, every single one of you. It is their way of subjugating you once again. Wake up, people. Why do you need a license to grow a plant? Now, if you want a license to grow a plant, in my book, be my guest. Because if you want to get into bed with those snakes, go ahead and do it. But I am going to work tooth and nail to make sure that if somebody out there does not want a license, they won't get criminalized because of it. They're insidious, and I'll tell you why. Lesotho's had a legal regimen for a year. Already they're embroiled in it. Already their ministers are already doing backhanders and selling it here and transporting it there. Look at the Minister of Transport. Her husband's got a truck and there was 5 million rounds worth of weed in it. They're breaking the laws that they created themselves, and if anybody wants to get in bed with their government with a government license, you deserve everything that comes to you. It's not just Africa. That is the mayor of Massachusetts. He's just lost his job because he sold $600,000 US of licensing concessions. This is human nature, people. Licensing for anything does not bode well. It doesn't end well for anybody. In Canada, there are 11 licensed producers by the government. In 2 years, they're all getting nailed by a class action for malpractice. Now, who wants a license to grow weed in Namibia? That's better. Because the narrative is just an elitist narrative for someone to be in pole position who's got a few bar in the back. Now he can get a license, but what about this? That is Westville maximum security prison, and there are 62 people on 39 beds. 80% of them are in for cannabis possession, awaiting trial, and their only crime is they don't have any bail. Now, what about licenses to these guys? Let's talk about licenses to these guys. Because anybody that talks about licenses for cannabis has got the cart before the horse. Think about these people. These four here, they got bust in Port Shepstone on their property with 4 kilos of weed. They've been in jail for 2 years, and they haven't spoken a word in their defense yet. Who wants a license for cannabis? It makes me mad. These 2 people here wear Join the Q t-shirts. We give them food. We do fundraisers for them. We do it all over the country, that are sitting in C-Maxes all over South Africa, waiting for the day for an amnesty. Oh no, but the government is intent on handing out licenses. Who wants a license in South Africa for cannabis? You should be ashamed of yourselves, all of you. Think about these people first, and let's get our ducks in a row before you start any elitist thing. Somebody told me last night about a very, very rich Namibian businessman who's bought up a license in Lesotho. Do you think he cares about all of these Rastafarians getting nailed every single weekend and thrown in a jail for 2 days? No, he doesn't. Well, we do, and we're going to fight tooth and nail for these people. Okay, that's my rant over, and now we get back to normal programming with this young lady here.
Cannabis is not legal in any form until the police are taken totally out of the cannabis industry, and all cannabis prisoners are set free, and all criminal records are expunged.
Exactly.
But before we can do that, we need to put some systems into place. So these last few things that we've got before our voices run out are just some thoughts of putting systems into place, because you've got to get your ducks in a row. So these are some quick thoughts to just take home with you and think, how can I be involved in one of these things here? Now the point I want to make with putting systems into place is not everybody needs to grow weed. We need weed accountants, we need weed lawyers, we need weed transport and couriers, we need people to put the irrigation systems in place, we need doctors who are prepared to learn about cannabis so that they can service the population. So each one of these systems goes into the support industry for cannabis. So I promise you, rather leave the growing of the cannabis to the farmers and those people who are connected to the land. If you are living in the city, rather develop your business or a new business if you want to be a support industry, because I promise you, at the end of the day, that's where the money's going to be. Really is. Make a weed courier. That's what we're always saying to people, because people are always being bussed by the courier. Make a cannabis courier so that you can transport everybody's cannabis all over the place. So these systems that we think should be put in place in Namibia as soon as possible are systems for security, for quality control and evaluation, testing, for cannabis education, for paying attention to cannabis and the environment. Now I believe that Namibia is one of the countries that is most threatened by climate change. And I believe that because every single country in the world is threatened by climate change. We need to grow cannabis that doesn't threaten our environment. We need to think about health and caregivers. Let's put the doctors aside for a bit. How about becoming somebody who is a cannabis caregiver? That you can acquire the knowledge and maybe grow the plants and go around with very, very sick people and help them. If you're one of those angels, we need lots and lots of cannabis caregivers, primary health care workers. We need scientific research. Now we hear this thing all along that more research needs to be done, more research needs to be done. Yes, it does. And that research needs to be specifically African research. We do not want Chinese hemp seed in Africa. We've got African sativas that can make beautiful fabric and clothes and fuel and fiber and build houses and everything. So we need African research. We need to think about workers' rights within the cannabis industry. Hopefully the cannabis industry in Namibia is going to blow up within the next few years. I'm sure it is going to, but don't forget about the workers, because it's always the workers that are left behind. And I can tell you, in California, the workers who go trim the weed and work in the gardens are not very well paid, and they're not very well looked after. So let's be a shining example. Let's think of the workers first. What about dacha tourism? Now, Namibia is perfectly placed for dacha tourism. Really. We already own dachatours.com, so we're looking into the future. We don't need Canadians and Americans and Israelis and all of them coming here, sniffing around to see how they can buy up our weed industry. We need those foreigners to come to South Africa and Namibia, Zimbabwe, Lesotho, Swaziland, all of us. We need them to come here and spend their dollars on tourism. Namibia already has a fantastic tourism industry. Let's incorporate cannabis into that. And then this was our slide from our South African presentation, and it's called What About Our Neighbours? And we are absolutely adamant that we are going to include our neighbours in every single conversation. And when we have those meetings in South Africa about our regulations, not everybody can be there, but you can tune in for the live stream, or you can go and watch the session on our YouTube channel. We really need to not have fights about cannabis in Southern Africa. We've had enough fights. It's terrible what's going on in South Africa at the moment about the xenophobia. So maybe we can mend some of those terrible things that have been going on in our country lately by reaching out in the cannabis world.
you know, when you've been living in the underground like we have with cannabis for the last 30 years, dodging the bullets and diving away from the cops, just like all of these gentlemen over here, it's difficult to come out with a word called regulation. It doesn't roll off my tongue very well, because we've never been regulated. We're the outlaws of the whole thing. But if we're going to get this straight, we have to put societal regulations in place like we do with other societal narcotics. So that is a very, very poorly made picture of 150,000 people smoking weed at 4:20 in the afternoon on the 20th of April 2019 in Vancouver, Canada. They had a permit. They were permitted for the day to do it. And that's where I'm going with this conversation about regulation. We have to put systems in place to introduce cannabis in a benign way into society. You can't go there tomorrow morning and smoke weed in a public park. But they had a permit and they were regulated to do so for the day. Here's a big one. At what age should we allow people to use cannabis in the freedom of their minds? Alcohol is 18 in Namibia, I believe, 18 years old for alcohol. Well, let's start with that. In America, where we went, one of them is 19, three of them are 21 years of age. And it's the same for alcohol. So we'll have that debate. I'm nearly 60, I really don't care. You can do the small print amongst yourselves, but really, there's this weird thing in society where somebody sucked their thumb and said, oh no, it's 18, you become an adult then. Okay, well, let's do that then. Let's make it 18 to appease our oppressors. Oh, the big one, the big one. There's the most amount of money being invested in cannabis research at the moment worldwide is to figure out a breathalyzer. Nothing to do with climate change, nothing to do with tumours or cancer or bilharzia, just to make sure that they can criminalise us further. Now, 2 people stuck their hands up and said, I don't use cannabis products. That means every single one of you guys drove in here stoned. It must do, because it sits in your blood for 30 days. And when was the last time you stopped smoking weed for 30 days? You haven't. What about the transportation of it, as Myrtle says? The transportation's a big thing. In South Africa, I can travel with a few grams as long as I can prove it's for personal use. If I had a kilogram and 20 grand in the back seat, then that would be a bit of an issue, because the cop could see damn well that I'm probably enriching my life in a financial way from weed, and you're not allowed to do that, obviously. So the transportation of weed is going to become a very, very big issue, and start buying those armoured cars now, guys, because you are going to be transporting weed all over southern Africa, and you just think, if you got 10 kilograms of weed, and it's worth 250,000 rand a kilogram, do the maths. Storage, facilities. You grow 10 kilos of weed, now what are you going to do with it? You're going to leave it in the house, and then all of a sudden the cops rock up and there's 9.5 kilos of weed. It must be the proceeds of crime. So this thing about storage and keeping your weed safe for a year, because you're a dakabu, yeah? You're going to grow one harvest, and you're going to put it into storage, and you're going to use it for the next 12 months. That's what happened to us. We grow one harvest a year, and there happened to be 1.8 kilos of weed in the house, but it was the middle of winter. It has to last us all year. We smoke bucket loads of weed. But you try to prove that to the police that 1.87 kilos is personal use. And drug testing. Whoa, dearie me. The laws haven't caught up with drug testing yet. You can still be fined in South Africa for having THC in your urine sample with no quarter. So there's a lot of societal work to do to get these regulations in place. It's a big one, the drug testing, for sure. Looking to the future.
So we need to engage with the government. We always sort of pull a face, because, you know, we sued them in court, but now we're at the point where we need to now go and shake hands with the government. We need to all stick together, and one of our mantras is, and I think it's particularly pertinent given this Namibian guy who went and bought a Lesotho license. In my book, he's a traitor, and he should be charged for treason, because you need to look after yourself, your family, your community, and your country first. We don't need South Africa selling weed to Namibia. Namibia is quite capable of producing its own. Right now, that's kind of the circumstances, it seems. But look after yourselves first. please, before you start giving Canadians licenses and that sort of rubbish. We need to enhance technology. This is the 21st century and we've got all sorts of stuff that we can use to our advantage. Not only the internet, we've got all sorts of things like blockchain and AI and this and that I don't know much about. But we need to harness 21st century technology. We need all of the Namibian cannabis farmers to be on an app. Okay, with growing tips and frequently asked questions and all of that. Because one thing that we realized in South Africa is it doesn't matter how remotely you go, when you get there to that little village, there's a smartphone. So don't think that because your people are living in rural areas that they're not up to speed with 21st century technology. So use it to your advantage. We need to educate and educate and educate, and that is basically what we've been doing now. We haven't been harping on the education thing because we feel like we're standing here doing it, but we really do. You need to have serious conferences for all of your healthcare professionals. Not only doctors, we need nurses and social workers and everybody to be educated. It's a huge job, it's a challenge, but it has to be done. You need to participate in the international forums that we are talking about. Namibia is not an island, and we really need far more drug policy representation from Africa. At the moment, when we go to Vienna, I promise you it is us, one lone guy from Zimbabwe, one lone guy from Mozambique, and a few Ghanaians and a few Kenyans. There's nobody else there. We really need Namibia to join the party. And my favorite one, right at the end, because this is going to make the impact, let's use cannabis to empower our women. This is very, very important. We need to use cannabis, it's right there, it's going to be a fledgling regulated industry. Let's jump in there in the beginning and let's give the women a break. Because I know in South Africa it's mainly the women that are growing the cannabis, and then the men take it over and then they do the trade with it. And we need cannabis to be used as a great equalizer. And we need to use it for the empowerment of women.
So how can you help us? Because heavens, we need help. It's like 2 people with 3 more in the office. It's a small company, but we do what we can. So go and have a conversation with on social media. If we flick the switch now over our social media portals, including Twitter and Instagram and the rest, we can reach 100,000 people now. It's powerful. It's really, really powerful. We've got an army of people out there. So come and join us and get in on this conversation. We have 2 very, very vibrant websites, fieldsofgreenforall.org.za. If you put in Cannabis South Africa, it just pops to the top. We've done all of this work to get it to the top because we consider ourselves the go-to people. What do you want to know about weed? We're broke. We shake the tin everywhere we go unashamedly. We run on donations. As Myrtle said flippantly, we did sell weed to get to New York. We didn't know any other way of doing it. And the cherry on top was we actually told them so when we got there. We've got a massive drive to stop our South African cops. We're exposing every cop that does any form of malpractice, like jumping a door or booting down a door with no warrant. We will expose him in his personal capacity. If you go to our blog roll on Fields of Green for All, sign up to our newsletter. 3 days ago, we put a video up of 4 cops jumping over somebody's wall, armed to the teeth, looking for weed. So we expose them all and we don't care. And it's scary. We're only 2 people with a bourgeois, middle-aged white people ratting on the black cops. Whoa, it's pressure. But we're adamant, we have to stop the cops meddling with our plants. Here's a cool idea. Because of the privacy laws, we have now got there's an influx of people that are now creating clubs in a private manner. You put private on your gate and you invite 20 of your friends over to your house and there's a clubhouse. It's basically a drug consumption room. Just like everybody drinks ethanol, there's a drug consumption room over here by the pool. It's called a pub. Well, that's just what we want. We want a drug consumption room. So, the Dhaka Private Clubs initiative by Fields of Green is being run on a Spanish model. There's over 130 private clubs in Barcelona alone. The cops can't come in. It's a private place. So a cooperative grows 99 plants. 99 people can grow 99 plants. in Barcelona law. So we're adapting it. And as far as we know 4 in Johannesburg, there's maybe 2 or 3 in Cape Town now, and their downfall is if they go on social media going, look at us, we've got a private club. Well, the minute you go on Instagram, it's not private anymore, and the cops back down your door. Which part of that don't you understand? Keep it private. Keep it to yourselves. Keep it within your community. If somebody knows there's a Dhaka private club, you're doing it wrong, because it's meant to be private. Yes, we're not alone. Look at this lot. If you think it's just Fields of Green for all, this is civil society in South Africa as it stands at the moment. Now we can join in with the Namibian brothers and sisters, because we're powerful. Because there's one thing that sets us apart from all the other things. We are speaking the truth, and we are on the right side of history. Make no mistake. If anybody thinks they're going to carry on for the rest of their lives harping on about cannabis prohibition, you are on the wrong side of history. You're going to be upset in the end. And as I said on local radio 4 hours ago, if you don't like cannabis, you're not going to like the future. And I put this up after every single presentation that we've made over the last 6 years, and this is the crux of our argument. This man said this 100 years before I was born, and it stands true right to this minute. We don't really, in our hearts, care about medicine, fuel, fibre, hempcrete, or anything else. It is our sovereign right to put in our bodies whatever we want, and that is the crux of our argument. That's what we told the judge, and that's who's agreeing with us.
My name is Myrtle Clark.
And my name is Julian Stars.
And we are the Dhaka couple.
Stunned, you have no questions, huh? Great, we did our job.
Now we have questions.
Thank you so much, Jules and Myrtles. You're amazing. That was a lot, and I hope you took in as much of it as you can. But so we're live streaming everything and recording everything so that you can, it's so much information and education to take in, so you can go back to it and share it on your social media, you know, and with your families and with your communities. And I'm going to talk a little bit at the end just about the organizations we have in Namibia and what we are doing. But we have one more basically international caller, and could you call them? They're calling in from California, and I think it will fit very nicely in with Namibia. They are known as the Weed Nuns, the Sisters of the Valley from California, and they basically believe that cannabis is the one with the video. That cannabis is our God-given right. So yeah, let's just see if we can. Hi.
Hi.
Okay.
Hi everyone.
Hi. Thank you so much. I've just introduced you, so I'm going to give you the stage to just tell us what you're about and inspire us and educate us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm talking to you from a 1-acre farm in the Central Valley of California, where 5 years ago, I started by myself, but within a year later, I had a second sister join me, and a year later, I had 3 more join me, and now there's 8 women and 2 men that work on this 1-acre farm, and we make and sell about $1 billion a year worth of medicine. The implications here for people to understand is that we were all pretty much living in our cars. We had American health care, which was no health care. We had no economy. We're in farm towns who were very, very poor. And I realize poor is relevant. It's relative. So poor and poor. And I realize I'm talking to people who maybe see much more poverty than we see here. But the fact of the matter is the women were throwaway women. We were throwaway women. Society really didn't care about it, especially when you get past a certain age. The deregulation of the cannabis plant and the coming back of the hemp industry gives women and the marginalized a unique opportunity to take care of themselves. So we now have a 5-year-old business. We have 10,000 customers around the world that buy from us. We have gotten ourselves housing security, job security, bank account security, health insurance, sick days. We built ourselves a life, and we mainly did it around cannabis. Topical salve. This is a topical salve. This is our #1 seller. Now it's right as pain relief. It doesn't get any but higher. We are spiritual women. We're not connected with an organized religion. We go back to the Beguine ancestors and the Catholics of Europe. Our ancestors from the Catholics of Europe farmed and they ran stores for cattle. And on their farms, they grew hemp and cannabis products and medicines, and they sold them in the stores in the Catholics of Europe. Our Beguine mothers went extinct because of Christianity. Christianity and the Inquisition took out any smart woman that was studying and doing her own thing. So we are trying to reach back to pre-Christian times when it was okay to honor Mother Earth. And it is absolutely necessary that we all start honoring Mother Earth once again, because Christianity has also led to trashing of the planet and making it okay. So all of these things are tied together. Cannabis was only made illegal or against the teachings of the church 100 years ago. 100 years ago, cannabis was made illegal in order to put people of color in jail. That is a fact. If the people at your conference do not understand that the origins of cannabis demonization are racist in nature, you have a non-starter. You're never going to get out of this chute. And the fact is, by not embracing it, by taking a position that cannabis is somehow against religion, you're saying that it's okay for 5 white guys to own a whole new industry. You're saying it's okay for your very own people who were persecuted by these laws on purpose are going to stay out and become an industry that makes jobs across the board. Not any kind of job. These are spiritual, honorable jobs. You're putting your hands in Mother Earth and you're coming out with medicine. So we have 10,000 customers that we ship to all around the world. We happen to choose to play in a space of cannabis that doesn't get anybody high. And it's not that we make any judgment against it, because that medicine heals people with seizures. And that medicine keeps people from melting down and shooting. And that medicine is far better than opiates that make you rage and alcohol that makes you rage. So we have chosen to work where cannabis doesn't get you high because we want to ship it around the world. We ship our topical salve for arthritis around the world. We ship our oil for pain relief around the world. But we test every batch to make sure it's under 0.3% THC, and therefore it's called hemp. By U.S. standards and the world standards, it is hemp. It will not give you any high. It is an effective pain relief. And the whole world is tired of opiates. Everybody has been abused by opiates. So we are sort of the women here. We're riding a wave that is a return to natural medicine. And we're supporting ourselves. And you should be making that available to your women and your minority people as well.
Thank you so much. The network isn't the greatest, so maybe I can play the video that you sent me for the next 5 minutes.
Do they have trouble hearing me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so the quality isn't great on the live stream through Skype, but so I was thinking that maybe I'll just play the 5-minute video so we can actually hear what you said. We got bits of it, but I don't know if people in the audience understood the whole thing. You got it? Yeah? Okay. Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, have you guys got any questions you want to ask the sisters quickly? We have about 2 questions that we can squeeze in. No, okay. Thank you so much for joining us, for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
And thank you for taking on this very, very important subject.
Thank you so much, and thanks for all you do.
Okay, bye. Bless you all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Okay, so it's almost 5 o'clock. So I think we're going to start wrapping it up, because I think having that much information, people will start to like switch off at some point. I'm gonna.
Myrtle and I will be outside. If you want to come and converse, we're good at this. You're brilliant. If you've got any concerns, you must have concerns in Namibia. It's a different place here. So come and talk to us, and maybe we can alleviate those concerns.
Yeah, so we'll also, Gareth Prince will be around alongside the Dacha couple for a while longer. So just in terms of what we're currently doing in Namibia, we have Ganja Users Namibia and the Rastafari United Front, who've been at the forefront and advocating for a really long time. And, you know, so much respect for you guys. And I've been advocating alongside them, and we've now set up the Cannabis and Hemp Association of Namibia, and we aim to be a platform that provides education. So we want to give not just the public, but also people who work, for example, vets, doctors, healthcare practitioners, you know, farmers, agriculturalists. We want to give people a platform to come and find information, find education, find links to people who have the knowledge on this plant, and who can help, for example, set up a farm, who can work with doctors to treat patients. So this is what the aim is, and to work really closely alongside Ganja Users Namibia and the Rastafari United Front. And also we want to advocate for legalization in Namibia. This is at the forefront of our struggle. And we really, Namibia is such a small country. It's a big country, but it's got a really small population, you know, and we have the opportunity to create a really unique legalization process here, and learn from what has been happening all around the world, and learn from our neighbors, and with the support of our neighbors in South Africa, you know. So I think it would be amazing if the public, you know, and people who are sitting in places of parliament, people who are sitting on the boards of the agricultural or the farmers committees or doctors, you know, come and work with us. You know, I have over 20 years of experience with cannabis almost, you know, and we can put this into really good use. We are on the streets, you know, with Ganja Users Namibia, and what is lacking is the support of the people, because we are a few against these really big industries and the big governments, and we need society to come together in Namibia, you know, all of us to stand together. Just because you support cannabis doesn't mean that you necessarily smoke it. But in the near future, you know, if you have a farm with animals, it might be really great for you to be able to plant cannabis to feed your livestock with it. Or if you have a child that develops cancer, you know, you might want to treat your child with a natural medicine rather than chemotherapy or any kind of pharmaceutical. If you're interested in creating clothes, or if you're interested in building housing, you know, for affordable prices, and housing that's environmentally friendly, all of these things are possible. But these things are only possible if we as Namibians stand together, and if we start to stand up, because there's a few of us at the forefront, and we're being targeted, and we need a bigger voice. We need to show the people in power that this is something we want, and we're not advocating for everyone to smoke cannabis. Cannabis isn't for everyone to be smoked. This is not what we're saying. We are not trying to like get some really, you know, horrendous drug legalized that will destroy communities. We are trying to get a plant that is like a tomato, or that is, you know, like celery. We are trying to get our human rights recognized to use what we want, and this plant has a lot of potential. So also one of the things that I do in Swakopmund is I run a project for addicts, because that seems to be one of the points in Namibia that people always address, is that cannabis is highly addictive and it's destroying the communities in Namibia. That's not the case, you know. We have people smoking cannabis, and it might make people pretty, you know, lazy, maybe a bit chilled out, whatever your perception is of that. But we have severe issues with alcohol and mandrax in these communities. And these are the people I work with every day. I'm sticking needles into their ears and trying in a holistic manner to get them off of these hardcore drugs. And there's like huge evidence showing that we can, it's not a gateway drug. We get people off of the hard drugs with cannabis. So if we can start to work together, you know, and get all these different elements into one melting pot and stand with each other, then we can start to get this moving. And there is a little bit of an urgency in terms of this with climate, and to make sure that, you know, foreign investment, or people like Knowledge Kati don't come and ruin, you know, this industry for us and take away all the work that we're putting into it and selling it to the highest bidder. So thank you so much to everyone who's made the effort. Thank you again so much to our speakers to come here, to trust us and to just, you know, hop on the plane, get in the car and come and join us for this. And please, like, follow Ganja Users Namibia, come to the marches, come to the education. Like, I stand in Swakop every week, you know, educating people in the street with the brothers from the Rasta community there. Come and join in, come and ask your questions, come and support us, tell us your stories that you have with cannabis. Yeah, thank you.
And come and buy a t-shirt.
Yes, buy a t-shirt and have a chat.
Take a picture. Take me. Lot, take a lot. That's Gareth Briggs, the man with the kind
Thank you.